All right, let's turn now in my commentary to Galatians 10, which is this section that we're going to start getting into, chapter 3, starting in verse 10 and working our way down through the next, say, probably 5 or 6 verses, is going to form a central part. It's going to occupy most of the content of my Galatians chapter 3 commentary. Indeed, this is one of the central features of Galatians chapter 3 itself. So let's see what we have to see here. The verse reads, as we read it again, I'll read it again in my commentary. It reads, "For all who rely on works of the law are under a curse, for it is written, Cursed be everyone who does not abide by all things written in the book of the law to do them." Essentially, when misunderstood from its larger context, this opening Galatians 3:10 verse, where Paul says that all who rely on the works of the law are under a curse, things like that. When we take it out of its context, I think it will invariably lead the reader to the incorrect conclusion that Paul is advocating some complete mitzvah by mitzvah, that is commandment by commandment, Torah submission, for everyone wishing to attain right standing with the Almighty. Top of page 112. That the first century Judaisms did not advocate a view that required complete Torah obedience before one could be counted as a covenant member is attested to in the later rabbinic compilations that survived the destruction of the temple. Put simply, I say in my commentary, no one in Paul's day thought that a person must practically walk out each and every single commandment in order to receive covenant membership into Israel, viz. Salvation. They did not teach the people, that is the leaders of Paul's day, didn't teach the people, in order to be a covenant member, you need to walk out the Torah perfectly, each and every commandment. That's simply not their position. They did teach that it was incumbent upon covenant members to keep the Torah. Don't get me wrong. The leaders of Paul's day were, in fact, of the understanding that the Torah of Moshe was the covenant responsibility given to Israel at Mount Sinai, we call Exodus chapter 19 and 20, and that this covenant membership, at least the Mosaic part of the covenant, entailed obedience to the covenant. So it's not like they just thought, well, God gave the Torah because it was a kind of a nifty idea that God would include with the Abrahamic covenant, and kind of this nifty idea that if the people of Israel ever felt that it was something that they wanted to do, something that maybe they had time to do, in their spare time, if they've got a chance, maybe they could glance at the scroll of the Torah and, see if there was something in there that caught their attention, or something that they might be inclined to do as a hobby. If the Sabbath looks appealing to you, maybe you might try to enjoin upon it, keep it as a nifty idea that might be really fun to do as a family exercise or activity. If you're looking for a children's game, maybe it might be really fun. If you want to try and keep some of the laws related to the food laws, things like that. You can kind of hear the humor in my voice. The Torah is not just a family activity. It's not just a real nifty hobby that God gave to Israel that He would hope that they would, kind of gravitate towards as they live their life in the land of Israel. That's not the point. It was a covenant agreement, and it was part of the covenant that was attached to what we today would call the Mosaic covenant. In other words, it was a responsibility as their people to do what God asked them to do. It wasn't something that they really had an option to do. It was they had made a promise. For their part, it was something that they had covenantally bound themselves. It was a commitment, is the point I'm trying to make. And yet, it wasn't the type of commitment that made them into God's people. Nor did anyone in Paul's day believe that God expected this type of obedience from covenant Israel. If you read through the Torah, God did not use the language of, "Hey Israel, you've got to keep all of it or else you're not my people." Now, we do see that God does use the language of, therefore Israel, continue in all of these words of the covenant, keep all these words and things like that. So there is the idea that there's no picking and choosing. You can't say as an individual Israelite, okay, we'll keep half of it, but the other half, it just doesn't really appeal to us. It's not really, it's not really politically correct for us. Therefore, we don't really like the parts that speak of, say, forsaking idolatry or something like that. After all, everybody else in the land is worshiping idols. Wouldn't really be wouldn't really be, what do we say today? It wouldn't really be politically correct for us to, it wouldn't be PC for us to forsake all idolatry, God. So we'll keep the food laws, God, and we'll bring the sacrifices. But as far as steering clear of idolatry, we've elected, we've decided as a people that we're not going to do those parts. Again, there was no picking and choosing, which is why God uses all-inclusive language when he talks about keeping the Torah. It's either all or none that you are committing yourself to. That's the point I'm trying to make. So this popular Christian viewpoint where God expected all of Israel to keep the Torah perfectly, or God expected all of Israel to keep the Torah in order to be counted as righteous, this viewpoint is unfortunately incompatible with a careful reading of the Torah itself. And I'm kind of highlighting that fact because many Christians still hold to this idea that God gave the Torah to the people of Israel in order for them to be righteous if they would keep it perfectly.